And now the latest across the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for October the 22nd. Well, this evening we have a similar screen that we've had for the past few Tropical Weather Bulletins. No tropical cyclones are active across the world tonight, although I wouldn't be surprised if that changes within the next 48 hours, with Invest 92E in the Eastern Pacific, as we'll look at in a bit, very likely to develop into a tropical cyclone. It's day 294 of 2021, and so far we've had 81 storms form, getting close to the average mark. Let's get right to the basins, why not? In the Atlantic Basin on day 143 of hurricane season, no storms and no areas of interest are active here. Do not let that deceive you that we've had a quiet October. We are still well within hurricane season, and models are depicting that we could see some potential formation as we get towards the end of the month into November, so stay tuned as we'll have to continue watching the Atlantic until the end of hurricane season. On the 159th day of Eastern Pacific hurricane season, Invest 92E is once again very likely to develop off the coast of Mexico. We could see some heavy rain and maybe some wind impacts here for the coastal areas of Mexico as this develops. It's actually getting fairly well developed right now. 70% chance of forming, by the way, in the next 2 days. In the Western Pacific, Invest 98W now has a 40% chance of forming, as model guidance has increased on that since last night, as it generally tracks northwestwards and then makes a turn northwards, thankfully missing most land areas, and the models are now picking up on something that could try and form in the South China Sea before it makes its way to the Vietnam coastline. I'll have to keep an eye on that one. In the North Indian Ocean and Southern Hemisphere, it's the same story as it has been the past week. No storms are active here, and no areas of interest are active. In the satellite view of the Atlantic Basin, it's generally quiet here. We have some frontal systems moving their way across the basin, including one firing some severe thunderstorms in the mid-Atlantic United States and Ohio Valley. We can also see some thunderstorm activity there across the Central America region into Mexico and Cuba. You can also see on the southwestern end of all that convection is our Invest in the Eastern Pacific, that being 92E. As the sun sets here, we can see some overshooting tops. We'll take a closer look at 92E in just a bit. Other than that, we have some general thunderstorm activity, a little bit of a blob of thunderstorm activity south of Hawaii. I can promise you, though, that is not going to become Hone. In the Western Pacific, we don't really see much that would indicate an Invest being here. 98W is hard to pick out, but that is where the officials have pinned it in the Western Pacific. And again, 40% chance of forming over the next 5 days. And the South China Sea is fairly quiet right now. Again, that is likely to change as models have been starting to depict that we could see some formation there. Regardless of development from that system, though, heavy rainfall is likely in portions of the Philippines and Vietnam. In the Indian Ocean, we see just general thunderstorm activity here, nothing signifying tropical cyclone formation. In the South Indian Ocean and entire Southern Hemisphere, really, we aren't seeing really anything depicting tropical cyclone formation. We're just about a week away, though, from the cyclone season's beginning, especially in the AU region. Here's a closer look at Invest 92E. We can see, again, those overshooting tops as it develops south of Mexico. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if by, Saturday time comes around, we have a tropical cyclone formed south of Mexico. So do keep an eye on this if you're on the coast of Mexico in the path of 92E. The sea surface temperatures for 92E, speaking of the system, very warm, 29 to 30 degrees Celsius there off the coastline. So it's definitely got the sea surface temperatures good. We'll have to see if the environmental conditions can sustain themselves being good for strengthening. The North Atlantic is quite warm, especially where we typically look for this time of year, the Caribbean. So do not let this quiet October deceive you, thinking that perhaps the season's over. The season is far from over. We have over a month left. In the Indian Ocean, looking towards all the Southern Hemisphere basins, are warming up quite nicely, ready for the cyclone seasons. And Northern Indian Ocean is also above average there, generally 28-29 degrees Celsius there. And in the Western Pacific, for both of our areas of interest, very warm sea surface temperatures, favorable for development. the seasurface temperature anomalies, you can clearly see the La Nina taking shape in the equatorial region. The Central Pacific is now generally below average. The Eastern Pacific is generally above average. A little bit of a cool pull there from Pamela. In the Atlantic, it's just about gotten itself back together after the systems that went east of Bermuda, those being Larry and Sam. And we're starting to see some near average areas in the main development region. I'd imagine that might just be due to what Victor did, and perhaps just as sea surface temperatures beginning to cool down. The Western Pacific is generally above average here, and the Indian Ocean and Southern Hemisphere basins generally above average. Again, those Southern Hemisphere basins getting ready for the cyclone season, about a week away. In the On This Day section, we're heading back to 2018. We were here just a couple days ago with Hurricane Michael, but we're looking at another powerful Category 5 storm here, this being Hurricane Willa, which was a Category 5 storm on this day, peaked as it tracked towards Mexico, would end up weakening, I believe, to a Category 3 hurricane before making landfall in Mexico, and ultimately would race its way, bringing some impacts to some areas in the United States and inland Mexico. We also had Tropical Storm U2 out in the Western Pacific, which you'll likely hear about in a couple of days, as that system was a very significant super typhoon for the Mariana Islands. I'll save that for when we do that On This Day section. Looking towards the naming lists, we're still looking out for the next name in the Atlantic Basin. The next two names are Wanda and Adria, Adria of course being in the auxiliary list. In the Eastern Pacific, the next two names are Rick and Sandra. We're likely to see Rick fairly soon. In the Central Pacific, I'm sorry to all you Hone fans out there, I don't think there's a really high chance at all of Hone forming until at least hurricane season of 2022. In the Western Pacific, we're looking out for potential systems there, MS98W and the South China Sea AOI. The two next names are Malu and Nyato. In the North Indian Ocean, the next two names are Jawad followed by Asanai. In the Australian region, again, as I've mentioned several times tonight, the Southern Hemisphere regions are nearing the beginning of their seasons. The next two names in the Australian region are Patty and Ruby. In the Southwest Indian Ocean, the next two names are Anna and Batsarai. And in the South Pacific, we're looking out for Cody, followed by Dovey. Thank you so much for watching this Tropical Weather Bulletin, and we'll have another one tomorrow night.